Dan, we're glad to welcome you with the movie K-Shop.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're screening it tonight, so the audience, we hope they're gonna love it. And I have a few questions about the movie. First of all, let's start with the beginning. The movie opens with a song, "Living for a Weekend."
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great song.
Okay.
And but hearing that song, it's like we instantly know that we are the movie set a decade ago.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that what you wanted?
I think maybe, yeah. I mean, obviously the film is set in the early 2000s at the beginning, but I think more just the lyrics of that song and the relevance of that song when it comes to British culture and the British way of life when it comes to drinking just was so relevant that it just felt like the best way to open the film, because it's all about our attitude to going out at the weekend and losing our minds.
That's very particular, and I think our audience is going to be curious about it, because we French people don't party the same way.
You definitely don't.
Yeah, and it's set in a small town. You always, when you wrote the script, did you already think it has to be in that small town? Oh.
The setting for the film, I mean, we always wanted to just make a film in a generic environment where you didn't actually put a name on it and say this is London or this is Brighton or this is Bournemouth. We wanted it to be somewhere where you never actually saw the name, because ultimately this is a culture that you have in every town centre, in every town and city up and down the UK. So it's a nationwide culture, and the idea was always to just not worry too much about the location. The fact that it's in a seaside resort is probably because when we go to the seaside, when we go to tourist resorts, we start to become even more badly behaved. Okay. So that was the reason why we decided to shoot it in a small, concentrated seaside resort. And if you were to go abroad and see British people in Ibiza or Zante or Magaluf, we behave even worse. So it's kind of this: when you're in your own town, you drink and you behave pretty bad. Then when you go to the coast for a holiday or a weekend, you get even worse. And then when you go abroad, you get even worse. And then when the football's on, you throw plastic chairs and you get even worse.
I get that. I think the main character is very well written, because it's a very positive character, and when the first event happened after, well, I don't want to spoil it too much because the audience has not seen it. You feel it's kind of doomed, just like that. And there, even if it's a very positive character, you feel he has so much anger in him.
Yeah, he's quite an angry guy. I mean, yeah, some of the press back in the UK were just like, this film's too angry and this character's too angry, and yeah, they didn't like it because it's quite an angry film, I guess. But yeah, I don't think anger was kind of the core emotion when I wrote the character, when I came up with the character. It was more just a sense of frustration. I think it's more just frustration, as opposed to somebody who's angry and wants to go and hurt people. It was more just a frustration that you're trying to talk to these people, or you try to talk to these people, or you try to talk to people in this culture, and there's just a sense of you can't even communicate. Yeah. And that, if you're exposed to that for a prolonged period of time, for a long period, and it happens over and over and over again, you become more and more frustrated by it. So I think that was kind of at the core of the character, as opposed to trying to make somebody who was going to go out and be really, really vicious.
So the way you can communicate with
yeah, it's frustrating when you're trying to have a conversation with someone.
Yeah, totally.
They can't give anything back.
Yeah,
and they don't even care.
Exactly. In the first scenes, he's always very polite, very respectful and doesn't get the same thing back.
Well, his studying, his university is all about trying to become a diplomat, trying to become somebody who can go into other countries and be a force for good and do it the right way, or the way we're told to do it. which is almost a British value of, you know, being proper and being respectful, and he's an alien in British culture, almost being more British than the people he's surrounded by that are indigenous to the UK. So it's all about that, really.
And he's a good example of integration at first, as
I think most foreigners in our country are.
Yeah.
I think most people that come to our country integrate perfectly well, and we have a very specific view of them, which is manufactured and created, which is that they come, they take, and they don't integrate, and then they leave with loads of money. But it's not the truth. I think most people are like Salah in the start of the film, and they come and they do what they can to be as much a part of the community as possible.
Yeah. How did people react in the UK about the fact that you show someone who's totally integrated and has to somehow fight through English people who are going absolutely crazy for no reason?
It's been quite divisive. I mean, I always just assumed that people would really sympathise with the character and be of the opinion that he's the good guy and that he's cleaning out the trash and taking out the bad guys, and that would be quite easy to understand. But on the whole, that has been the general reaction. But there's also been an opinion that maybe we are demonising working class people, and that we are saying that working class people are all like this and they're all bad and we're stereotyping, and of course we are stereotyping a little bit on both sides. But you know, it makes me sad that people think that you're making a film that is being racist or attacking white people.
There's something very interesting in your movie. I don't know if you will agree, but when I saw it the first time, I thought about Eden Lake. You remember Eden Lake?
Yeah. With Fassbender
and Kelly Riley. Yeah, because in the bad guys in the movie they're just regular young people. They're not like spectacular movie villains. It's just young people fooling around, and it's just climbing up. It's just building up. It's the same way in K-Shop. It's just regular guys, and they are the real bad guys.
Yeah, there are. I mean, I think a few critics have made direct parallels between the two films, because it is very much it's almost a middle class versus working class thing. And in Eden Lake, I don't know, maybe the youth, the bad guys in Eden Lake they're all very monstrous, and they come up with plans and they torture, and that film got very heavily criticised for its attack on working class youth and hoodie culture, and yeah, there are obviously they are just human beings, you know, at the end, and that's what I tried to do with the film in the second half of the film, where again, I don't want to reveal too much with people that haven't seen it, but he has a conversation with one guy, and the guy tells him, you know, I grew up and my dad was an arsehole, and, you know, we had an argument of falling out and I was treated really badly. And I'm not justifying why he behaves the way he behaves. I'm just saying, look, he is still a guy, he's still a human being. He isn't just a monster that goes around and gets drunk on the weekend. Yeah. He comes from somewhere. He was born in a town and he was raised, and there are reasons why people go out and behave the way they do, as opposed to them just being evil. I think that's what we were trying to do. Yeah,
but I think in some way both movies, and also like a movie like, well, it's over the top, but like a movie like Harry Brown, you know, the Vigilante movie with Michael Caine, it kind of shows something we don't have in France. It's like British people are kind of pissed and angry at their youth.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's our youth. I think it's our pace of life in the UK is very different to France. I mean, I spend a bit of time in France, so I feel like I can see what's obviously different about our culture and your culture, and maybe European culture on the whole, but it's a bit slower here, and people aren't fighting tooth and foot to pay their rent and to get a job and to make their money and make ends meet, and everybody stops and has lunch, and everybody stops and has dinner at specific times, and the pace of life is not, you know, it's not radically different, but it's a little bit slower. And in the UK, our pace of life is out of control. We are just working all the time, shopping all the time, consuming all the time, and there's so much pressure on us to pay our rent and to get a job and to sustain a job and to make a living and to pay our bills, that I think when we get to the weekend and we explode. And especially the young people who, you know, have basically been brought up now with next to nothing in comparison with what the generations before them had, and it's much harder for young people today in the UK and maybe all over the world to an extent than it was for the generations that came before. And they're frustrated and they're pissed off and they're going around and doing things, and we blame them and we attack them, but at the end of the day, you know, life is harder for younger people these days than it was for the generations that came before us. So in a way it's easy for us to say, look, they're out of control, they're drinking loads, they're being really violent, or they're hanging around in parks and starting fights. But there is a reason for that, I think. And in the UK, our pace of life is so much faster that it's maybe even more out of control than it is here in France. Although there is obviously the same thing. Yeah, I think maybe it's just intensified a bit more by our pace of life. Okay,
it's all about the social context. And now you're showing the movie abroad in many countries with the festivals. And even if we're different, we have the same kind of culture, France, UK, yeah. But when you go, like, I don't know, in Italy, in Spain, or other countries, southern countries, how do people react to the film?
On the whole, I think people see the extreme of this culture and they are shocked. I mean, when we first showed it to the sales agent managing the film in Cannes, and he'd been expecting it and waiting for it, and we finally went and showed him the film, he just came away and he was like, I just don't believe it. He was like, I don't believe British people behave like this. Because he's just used to watching Harry Potter and Queen Elizabeth and, you know, period dramas. So they don't see this part of British life. And I think, again, we were in Portugal last weekend, and I think they were the same. They're like, no way. This isn't the case, and you're like, I'm sorry, you know, this is how it is to a larger extent. So yeah, you know, there is an element of shock. People are genuinely like, no way, and then you say that 65% of the footage is real footage that we shot of real people behaving badly, and they are like, no, I don't believe it. And you have to say, yeah, you know, we went and shot people doing that stuff and just put it in the film. But then in Eastern Europe, it's maybe slightly different. Eastern Europe, they maybe, they get a little bit more hung up on the racial thing.
Okay.
They see it as a guy from the Middle East taking on white people, and it doesn't sit as comfortably maybe.
Okay. It's very interesting the fact that you use real footage.
Yeah.
At some places in the movie. And do you think it's something the audience should know? Or
yeah, I mean, I don't make any bones about it. I mean, it's 2/3 of that footage is real stuff. Me and my DOP Chris just going out, standing on street corners and watching drunk people spill out of clubs and bars and just filming them. And yeah, it was funny. I mean, it started off funny, and then of course, you know, it is funny in the film. But when you're out filming it, it starts, you know, night after night after night, you start to feel like Salah, and you start to feel very distant from it, like you're looking at it sober. I mean, I like a drink. I like going out. I'm British, so I drink and I go out, and, you know. But I think, I've got no problem saying that a lot of the footage in the film is real, and I think you just got to take from that what you like. I think you just got to make your own opinion as to what you think about that footage. But yeah, and that's just over a couple of nights. This stuff happens all the time.
I think that's an information we might have to give to the audience tonight after the movie and see how they react.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Let's do it.
Okay, so we're gonna stop. Thank you so much.
No worries.
This interview.
All good.